This on your screen is the letter of the Prime Minister's resignation. The letter has been submitted to the President now. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has resigned following weeks of anti-government protests, and WION has been able to access the letter of the Prime Minister's resignation, which is currently on your screen right now. The letter has been submitted to the President for confirmation, and we'll be waiting for the President to tell his countrymen and country people if he's accepted the resignation or not. The senior Rajapaksa had initially resisted calls from the opposition to step down, but now it seems the public pressure has forced him to throw in his towel. Reports say President Gotabaya Rajapaksa asked the Prime Minister to resign at a special cabinet meeting. Remember, Mahinda is the eldest brother to President Gotabaya. Mahinda himself served as the President of Sri Lanka from 2005 to 2015. Together, the Rajapaksa clan has been accused of creating the economic crisis in Sri Lanka. We are now being joined by Ambika, who is a former commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. Ambika, welcome back, and I hope you can hear me right now. Probably you can tell me what is the impact of this resignation of the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka?
Well, I think it is a relief, because apparently there's been reports that there have been firecrackers even in areas that were previously strongholds of the family and of their party. So there is some relief, people saying finally, but what they're also saying is one down, many to go. Because if you recall, the main demand of the protesters and where this all started was for the president to step down, and the president is still in power. So therefore, this would be like, yes, something has finally happened, but not also what people have been demanding. So because the prime minister has resigned, the cabinet also stands resolved. The president can appoint anyone who commands the majority in parliament, commands the confidence of the majority in parliament.
Sri Lankans seemed divided because earlier today we had protests of demonstrators supporting the Prime Minister. Others were against the Prime Minister, and those protests turned violent. Will this not further escalate the crisis in Sri Lanka, you think?
I would just like to clarify that a bit, because the people who were brought previously, I mean, the people who have been protesting in Colombo and in other parts, they're not party affiliated. Some of them might have party affiliations, but all those who were brought to Colombo, they didn't come. They were also supposedly, there's increasing evidence that they were brought in buses by the SLPP, that is the regime. And there's also evidence emerging about them being paid, and they were brought in, and they first went to the Prime Minister's residence, the office, Temple Trees, where they were allowed in, and they pledged their allegiance to the Prime Minister, and then they said they were going to the main protest site in Golface. Before they did that, they actually destroyed the protest site outside the Prime Minister's office. There were police there. It is a high security zone. It is right next to the police station, but yet that violence was allowed to happen. Then no one prevented them from going to the main protest site. There were police there, but there were no permanent barricades. Initially, they did not even use water cannons or tear gas, and the pro-government people were seen. There are a lot of video footage emerging of them attacking the protesters, the peaceful protesters. So that is what happened. So in a sense, the government created a situation where there was incitement of violence, and the government did nothing to prevent it. The police did nothing to prevent it. And now what we are seeing is also that the government supporters are being chased. They were chased into the lake, and the protesters are demanding from them, why did you come here? And one of them is saying, well, it's just a job for us. That is there on video. So in a sense, it's not escalating. It is a situation created entirely by the government, and thereafter they declared curfew. So it is up to them to de-escalate, because what they have shown is that they are not able to ensure the protection of peaceful protesters, that they're not able to maintain law and order, that such an act of violence of destroying the protest site happened right in front of the Prime Minister's residence, and they did nothing about it.
Ambika, just like many other people would ask, are resignations enough, really? Will that ease the crisis in Sri Lanka?
No, not at all. because we do have the president still in power, the economic crisis, and also transparent governance, or what has been happening now is it's not been transparent at all, because the Minister of the Energy, Petroleum Services says that we have enough supplies. He says it's been sent to the service stations, but you see several queues miles long. The queues are several miles long. And what people have been saying is that the service station or the petrol fuel stations are owned by politicians and or their supporters, which means there is also a lot of hoarding going on, a lot of black market. The demand is escalating. So what has been happening is also non-transparent governance, a crisis of governance and corruption. So the Prime Minister stepping down is a first step, but we have a very long way to go.
Ambika, let's talk about the what ifs. What if the whole government decides, you know what, we'll resign, we'll call it quits? Who is capable, or who do you think is capable of handling the crisis and easing the problems that Sri Lankans are currently facing at this moment?
Well, right now, in a way, the government has dissolved, because when the Prime Minister resigns, the cabinet stands dissolved. And then it's up to the president to appoint anyone who commands the majority, the confidence of the majority in the parliament. So it's not about who can handle the crisis, but who would have the majority. And what the rumors, the stories is that the opposition does have the majority, that they do have the 113 required. But of course, they have first said that they would not accept a position. Now, apparently, they're saying that they're okay to a unity government, but a leader of the opposition does not want to accept the position of prime minister. So they might stop. They might bring the former speaker into parliament via a national list. So there's still a lot of, shall we say, horse trading going on. The political instability, definitely. And of course, the main demand is that the president step down, and he has not. Of course, there's also a 25th Amendment to the Constitution that is being put forward, which is about abolishing the executive presidency. So if they do get the numbers in parliament, then that is also a possibility. Then you have a titular president who is elected by the parliament and not by the people, and it becomes a more of a parliamentary system of governance. But for all that, you also need the votes.
Ambika, now that it has been confirmed that the Prime Minister has resigned, we are waiting for the President to confirm the same. But what happens next?
What happens next? Good question. I suppose whoever the president will have to appoint, as long as he doesn't step down, he'll have to appoint the person who commands the majority in the House, who has the confidence of the House as the Prime Minister. So that is the next step. And from, as I said, what I hear is that the opposition does have the numbers, the majority. So therefore, that is something we'll have to see. I think we'll see that unfolding in the next hours and next few days as to what actually does happen. Because in Sri Lanka, it's hard to make such predictions, because sometimes it often changes within a few hours, not even overnight now, within a few hours.
Ambika, also, this question has turned from not who, but what can save Sri Lanka at this moment.
What I think the protests, in a way, have been saving Sri Lanka. So I think citizen voices, putting it very clearly to the powers, and not just the government and the president, but also all politicians, that they do want clean governance, that they want accountability, they want their rights to be respected. And of course, on the economic side, we do need, bridging finance. We need to restructure our debt. We need to get a bailout package from the IMF. We need to ensure that the most vulnerable in society are not adversely impacted by the IMF package, the reforms that they want us to make. So in a sense, I don't think, once again, the problem with Sri Lanka has been that we've always looked to saviors, to one person, and it's not that. I think, if at all, what this has shown is that only a collective effort, and particularly participation by citizens, can actually save Sri Lanka.
Ambika Satkun Nanathan, thank you very much for your information and for your insights today. Ambika is a former commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. And if you're just joining us, this is breaking news, now developing story from Sri Lanka. The Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has resigned following weeks of anti-government protests, and WION has been able to access the letter of the Prime Minister's resignation. The letter has been submitted to the President now, and we await the President to confirm that he has received this letter, and he will also confirm if at all he okays the resignation of Mahinda Rajapaksa. The senior Rajapaksa had initially resisted calls from the opposition to step down, but now it seems the public pressure has forced him to throw in his towel. Reports say President Gotabaya asked the Prime Minister to resign at a special cabinet meeting. Remember, Mahinda is the eldest brother of President Gotabaya. Mahinda himself served as the President of Sri Lanka from 2005 to 2015. Together, the Rajapaksa clan has been accused of creating the economic crisis in Sri Lanka. The country's foreign reserves are down below $50 million, and this has triggered massive anti-government protests across the island. Just last week, the opposition filed 2 no-confidence motions in Parliament. One was against the President. The other was against the Prime Minister. It now seems that Mahinda had no intention of facing the no-trust vote. His resignation follows a similar move by the Parliament's Deputy Speaker last week. We are also receiving reports that Sri Lanka's Health Minister has also resigned. Once again, this is a letter that has been accessed by WION, or the Prime Minister's resignation. The letter has been submitted to the President, who will confirm receiving the letter and also confirm if he okays the resignation of the Prime Minister. This is developing story from Sri Lanka. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has resigned following weeks of anti-government protests. He had served as President from 2005 to 2015, almost a decade before he became the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. The senior Rajapaksa, who is the eldest brother to the current President of Sri Lanka, had initially resisted calls from the opposition to step down, but now it seems the public pressure has forced him to hand over his towel. Reports say President Gotabaya asked the Prime Minister to resign at a special cabinet meeting. Mahinda himself, like I mentioned, served as the President before he became Prime Minister from the year 2005 to 2015, and together the Rajapaksa clan has been accused of creating the economic crisis in Sri Lanka. The country's foreign reserves are down below $50 million, and this has forced many Sri Lankans to go to the streets and protest against the government's mishandling of the crisis and mismanagement of the funds. Just last week, the opposition filed 2 no-confidence motions in Parliament. One was against the President, the other was against the Prime Minister. And clearly it seems that Mahinda had no intention of facing this no-confidence motion. His resignation follows a similar move by the Parliament's Deputy Speaker last week, and it is important to note here that we are receiving reports that Sri Lanka's Health Minister has also resigned. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.